Hi, this is Tom Lombardo, Director of the Center for Future Consciousness, and this is Science Fiction, the Mythology of the Future, Part 3. The Dreams Our Stuff is Made of, How Science Fiction Conquered the World, by Thomas Disch. This book, written by the science fiction writer Thomas Disch, chronicles how science fiction both influenced popular culture, especially in the United States in the 20th century, and reflected popular culture, as well as both influencing and reflecting technological developments that were going on. Thus, science fiction often generated self-fulfilling prophecies in prediction, inspiring its readers to actually, in pursuing technological and scientific careers, to attempt to carry through on predictions made within science fiction. Thus, science fiction became a very powerful force within American culture during the 20th century. But more significantly, most of the popular movies that were produced in the 1980s and 1990s were in fact science fiction movies. The biggest money-making movies of all time included movies such as Star Wars, E.T., Jurassic Park, Terminator, and the continuing Star Wars saga. Cyberspace, Cyberpunk, and Postmodernism. Post 1980, pushing the envelope or the metaphysics of reality. Cyberpunk is the weaving together of computers, computer culture, and urban night counterculture, low-life street culture. It is dystopian and dark. Cyberpunk begins with William Gibson's Neuromancer. William Gibson defines cyberspace as a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators, a graphical representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data. In cyberpunk, we find a shift to the techno-facilitated inner space of computers. We find a movement into virtual reality or cyberspace that is not limited by the constraints of physical reality. We find a reflection of postmodernism, both in its ontological freedom and narrative freedom, which often involve flow of consciousness narratives. As noted, Neuromancer, which was a Hugo and Nebula winner for Best Novel of the Year, Science Fiction Novel of the Year in 1984, indeed is often seen as the beginning of cyberpunk, and it is the most influential and well-known of cyberpunk novels. But also I should mention Islands of the Net by Bruce Sterling, which is the second noteworthy cyberpunk novel and author, the Ware Tetralogy, produced by Rudy Rucker, which is a thoroughly enjoyable, crazy, inventive, comedic novel involving the evolution of AI, robots, virtual reality, the inclusion of aliens, higher dimensions, and material and chemical evolution. And finally, perhaps my favorite cyberpunk novel, Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, which is superb techno razzle-dazzle involving the mafia, pizza delivery, swordmanship, drugs, virtual reality, and a robotic dog that brings the curtain down at the end of the story. The Matrix, the trilogy of movies produced from 1999 to 2003, a cyberpunk trilogy. The Matrix as techno-metaphysics and regressive romanticism. The Matrix embodies a fear of technological evolution, and in particular the evolution of artificial intelligence. It is in fact derivative from Descartes' hypothetical omnipotent demon that presumably, if stimulating the brain, could produce normal experiences, and we would not be able to tell, in fact, if we were sitting in a lab having our brain stimulated or not, which is in fact the theme of the Matrix. The Matrix combines technology with mysticism and a messiah myth, and it is basically ambivalent about technology regarding whether it is a plus or a minus in our future. As Morpheus says from the Matrix, you take the blue pill, the story ends. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and they'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Avatar, and romantic naturalism. Continuing on the theme of science fiction cinema, Avatar, in my opinion, is probably the most beautiful movie ever made. It is the apotheosis of special effects, but in many ways is derivative from Poul Anderson's 1950 science fiction classic Call Me Joe, and it is both anti-technological and pro-naturalistic, elevating the noble savage above technology and industry. It is a romantic critique of high tech and industry, but it is a contradictory message because the main character is a techno enhanced, techno created being. Sci-fi, special effects, macho man, ultra-violence in the science fiction movie. Beginning in the 1980s and 1990s, we see an increased emphasis on special effects as computers empower our capacity to produce incredible visualizations on the screen. An emphasis over character, plot, imagination, and intelligence, and even over scientific and technological credibility, which is what sci-fi means. We see tough macho men as central protagonists and heroes, and we see excessive violence and action within these movies. But still, over the last few decades, there have been a number of high quality science fiction movies that I have not mentioned that have been produced. And up here are some of the better ones: Clockwork Orange back in the 1970s, more recently Cloud Atlas, Dr. Strangelove, also by Stanley Kubrick, Gattaca, Dark City, and 12 Monkeys. Probably, though, the one that I think is most noteworthy is Brazil, which also was produced by Terry Gilliam, who did 12 Monkeys. If you want a complete list of at least what I think of as the best science fiction movies ever produced, go to my website and go to Best Science Fiction Movies on the homepage. The Farthest Reaches of Space, Time, and Mind, 1990 to the present. How to explain, how to describe. Even the omniscient viewpoint quails. Vernor, Vinge. From 1990 up to the present, we see a continued evolution in the literary quality of science fiction. We see the science fiction novel ascending to increasingly more magnificent intellectual heights. We see scientific and technological inventiveness evolving. We see cosmic imagination. This is just a selective, very limited set of highlights of a few contemporary authors and novels of the last 25 years. Beginning with Dan Simmons in the Hyperion epic, or as he put it, the Hyperion Cantos. Immortality, time travel, infinite worlds, the second coming, archetypes of good and evil, and just about everything else. In the center of this image here, we see the Shrike, who in fact was the central character through the 4 volumes involved in the Hyperion epic. Hyperion, the fall of Hyperion, Endymion, and the rise of Endymion. These 4 novels span approximately 300 years, beginning in the 28th century. Hyperion, the first one, is structured in terms of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. All 4 involve incredible literary color and complexity, immense and rich imagination, ecologically, culturally, and technologically. We find the archetype of the Shrike, who is a time traveler, who is mysterious and enigmatic, who is both a murderer and a savior, and the most memorable character of the 4 novels. We find a debate between a futuristic Dalai Lama and a Grand Inquisitor. We find the reincarnation of the poet John Keats and the rise of the Catholic Church to galactic power. We see traveling through star systems instantaneously, and a second coming as a female who dies and is resurrected through time travel. Next, we turn to Vernor, Vinge, the Singularity, Virtual Reality, Alien Minds, and the Galactic Internet. Vinge is the creator of the concept of the technological singularity, that is, when computers exceed humans in intelligence. But aside from being a scientist, Vinge is a great science fiction writer who exhibits superb inventiveness when it comes to imagining alien minds. In A Fire Upon the Deep, we find very fascinating hack minds, and in a deepness in the sky, we find technologically sophisticated giant spiders who are the good guys in the novel. We find visions of the far distant future, thousands of years ahead, of a galactic virus, the perversion that moves through the galactic internet and begins to destroy galactic civilization. We see the growing infusion of virtual reality into our world. Kim Stanley Robinson, Ecological Engineering and the Utopian Dream. Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars, and 2312. In the Mars trilogy, we see the best series of books, Hugo and Nebula winners for best novels, on the colonization of Mars. These books are so ultra-realistic one forgets one is reading science fiction. They are integrative, involving the geological, biological, ecological, scientific, technological, social, psychological, political, ethical, and mythic aspects to terraforming another planet, in this case Mars. They are a contemporary utopian creation. This last year, in his novel 2312, Robinson again won the Nebula for Best Novel of the Year, and in this novel he continues to show ecological inventiveness, ecological engineering, literary inventiveness, and in this case involving colonizing and terraforming the entire solar system. Connie Willis, time travel, historical fiction, incredibly rich and informed historical fiction, where historical fiction is woven together with the future. We find time paradoxes, we find issues of free will and determinism set in the context of manipulating time, and we find recurrent comic elements as well. Connie Willis definitely combines together an understanding of history with the possibilities of the future and time travel. And in fact, she has won more Hugo and Nebula awards than any other science fiction author, having won 11 Hugos and 7 Nebulas for her novels as well as her short stories and novellas. Charles Stross and the Singularity. The novel Accelerando feels like it was written on speed. It's an incredible, electrifying, buzzing trip. It traces the emergence of the technological singularity through the 21st century, tracing our growing and complete dependency on our artificial intelligence technologies. The vile offspring, as humans refer to the technological singularity, is assimilating the solar system and turning it into a matryoshka brain. People experience multiple lives through living in virtual reality. As Gardner Dozois says, the Accelerando stories represent one of the most dazzling feats of sustained imagination in science fiction history, and radically ups the imagination ante for every other writer who wants to sit down at the future history table and credibly deal themselves into the game. Stephen Baxter, The Cosmological Narrative, The Zeeli and the Photina Birds, Vacuum Diagrams, and other stories and other novels that are involved in the Zeeli narrative. The Zeeli narrative has a timeline that runs from 20 billion years BC to 10 billion years AD. It goes from the birth to the death of the universe. It covers the great cosmic conflict of beings of light, the Zeeli, and beings of dark matter, the Photina birds. Humans, in fact, are a pawn in this cosmic saga. There is a cosmic Armageddon at the end, the great battle. There is a creation of a technological ring that serves as a portal for the Zeeli living the universe. And the whole story is narrated by God, that in fact is a supercomputer created by alien minds. In many other science fiction novels, Stephen Baxter continues to incorporate contemporary physics and cosmology with science fiction narrative. He produces high-powered scientific science fiction, such as in Manifold Time, Manifold Origin, and Manifold Space. He addresses Fermi's paradox regarding why we don't see any indications of alien intelligence in the sky. He produces ultra-realistic and graphic depictions of our pre-human ancestors. In Evolution, he generates a first-person saga of the evolution of intelligent minds on Earth from our deep past into our far future. And finally, in The Time Ships, he provides a continuation of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which takes up where The Time Machine leaves off, involving multiple and evolving timelines which loop back on themselves, and the whole novel turns into a grand experiment in metaphysics. The breadth and depth of science fiction. In summary, science fiction covers scientific and technological discovery and innovation, the relationship of humanity and technology, the future evolution of life and biotechnological augmentation, environmental, ecological, solar and galactic engineering, robots and androids, computers and AI, space exploration and space colonization, exploring the cosmos, alien contact, alien civilizations, alien minds, time travel, the manipulation of time, seeing into the future, human society and cities in the future, future cultures, utopias and dystopias, future wars, women, men, love and sex in the future, good and evil in the future, human evolution in the future of the mind, the self and intelligence, the transcendence of humanity, natural and cosmic disasters, the end of humanity, the nature and value of progress, philosophical, religious, and spiritual themes, including the existence and nature of God, new alternative forms of reality, alternative universes, the unknown and the mysterious, and in fact, to sum it all up, life, the universe, and everything, as captured in Douglas Adams' extremely popular science fiction story or novel called Life, the Universe, and Everything. The value of science fiction, in summary. If the world is becoming too conscious of the innumerable possible futures jostling for its attention, science fiction had a central role in creating that urgent consciousness. John Clute. Included on the next two slides are a set of classic and award-winning science fiction novels and authors that are not mentioned in the presentation. If you go to my website on the Center for Future Consciousness, you can see a list of what I consider to be the best science fiction novels ever written, which include a number, in fact, all of these additional novels that I've put up here on the screen on the next two slides. The value of science fiction. The great breadth and integration of topics and themes. It is highly interdisciplinary. It is pluralistic, providing multiple varied and realistic predictions and scenarios of the future. It is a holistic synthesis of cognition, emotion, and values. It stimulates both thinking and imagination. It provides hope, fear, excitement, vicarious power. That is the importance of the emotional dimension of futurist thinking. It uniquely mirrors the present. It creates and inspires the future and provides a medium for the expression of futurist ideas. It creates new symbols, icons, and archetypes. It warns us about the future. It stimulates future consciousness and the future evolution of consciousness. It is both entertainment and artistic creation. Finally, it is a synthesis of science and art, of science and myth. It is myths about the future for the future. And that is the end of part 3 of science fiction, the mythology of the future.